Maybe we give a couple of seconds more to let other people join in.
Great, you can see my
Yes.
my screen. Yeah, that's perfect.
Yes.
Thanks.
Maybe we won't have more people, but maybe we can start since it's very short, 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is to also to give you a chance to also have explain a bit more in depth what your work is, and also give a chance to also the audience to ask some question.
Yeah.
So if you want to start, Tom.
Yeah, because I have this presentation prepared and I will go a bit fast, maybe faster than usual, so you can have some extra questions in the end, and later on we can build up this discussion after this session also, of course. But I would like to start with this slide because AI is, like I just explained already, dramatically changing our news world in editing, news editing, wherever every step of the news production process will be affected by AI. And in fact, we are already using it, and often we don't know it yet. And everything we do with this little thing here, with the iPhone or the smartphone, has some form of AI already in it somewhere. And I like to kick off with this image of the future newsroom. It's maybe the way we will work again soon. Look at these relaxed journalists that they even read the newspaper again. I don't remember when I last could read a physically newspaper. But all kidding aside, yeah, turning back to today, algorithms, like we just explained, one of the key components of AI, are essentially designed to make our lives easier and solve problems. At least that's what they're promised to be. But some see these algorithms as a miracle solution, others find them suspect. And what is certain is that artificial intelligence will have an impact on every industry. It's already happening in the financial sector, in the health sector, and so on. And in fact, 69% of people working in newsrooms told the Future Today Institute that they're not worried about the future, that they don't know about the new technologies. And for me, that's a bit worrying. And I hope maybe you belong to the 69% or maybe the 31%. We'll see by the end of this session. But it's a figure by the Future Today Institute. That's a US think tank that researches media trends. So what can you expect now? First, I'm quickly going to explain what AI is all about, how it works, what we need it for, try to demystify it. Then I will update you on many interesting cases in our news business, but also some critical concerns, because make no mistake about it, this won't be a promotional talk for AI, because I want to pass along some warnings about where things can go wrong with the technology, and things we need to be alert for. And finally, I want to share some of my findings from researching this topic at Stanford University, where I was privileged to lead a study on synthetic media created by artificial intelligence. Here I am working with my team at Stanford at the design school. Why did I go there? Well, like I explained in the short introduction, I found that news editors have been always in history thoroughly shaken up by every new technological invention, you could say, from every wave of new technology, whether it was the telephone from 1876, I think, or the fax machine or the computer. They all had a huge impact on the distribution of tasks and the workflow within our newsroom. And it won't be different with AI. Just compare it with one of my professors, Andrew Ng, told AI is like the new electricity. It will transform every industry. And like we're today not aware of electricity everywhere, it will be the same with AI. And like the CEO of Google said, it's probably the most important thing that humanity has ever worked on. Well, today, you could say that already 15% of things that we already do can be automated. Through commercial history, everything that can be automated will be automated. And that's in fact 15%, according to the McKinsey report, of our daily activities of a journalist. And what kind of activities? Well, let's maybe first look at what AI is. There's a lot of myth surrounding this term of artificial intelligence. Some say it's a sort of some super intelligent being that we call artificial general intelligence. It's absolutely not. Maybe it's more like this, a couple of well-programmed washing machines in a row. And I think it's important to understand that there's nothing really magical about AI today. It's in fact nothing more than a couple of machines, washing machines set together, machines that can make autonomous decisions, but they don't have any feelings. They are not conscious at all. What we need for a good AI, well, it's a good and a strong computer system, and it's getting better all over the time. So it's a powerful, fast CPU. That's what we need. Algorithms, of course, what you might call a step-by-step instruction, like a recipe for our computer. And then yeah, data, of course, the new gold. And our industry, the news industry, is in fact sitting on a lot of data and a lot of gold. And what is it good for? Well, AI is a champion in everything that has to do with memory, with repetition, with prediction, with adapting to feedback, to detecting patterns, of course, detecting anomalies, and optimizing, of course. And therefore, I would love you to remember these 3 A's in AI. A stands for automate, augment, and amplify. And the 3 I's are for immediate. It's already happening. It's invisible, and the impact is enormous. And what you're about to discover is how AI can give us journalists like superpowers almost, to do our jobs better. It will give us more time to go in depth, work faster, and think more creatively, I believe. And will it take away our work from us journalists? No, I don't believe so. It will change our work, and it will create new jobs in the newsroom. It will take away some repetitive and boring tasks from us, since, yeah, machines do routine work much better than we humans do. And we have to ask ourselves, if a machine can help us, why shouldn't we allow it, of course? By the way, I also work with the London School of Economics, as I mentioned, and they did a very interesting survey over 81 newsrooms around the world, and they asked why editors are adopting AI, and this were the answers. Almost 7 in 10 said it would make journalists' work more efficient, and half of it said it would deliver more relevant content to users, and 2 in 10 hoped it would improve business efficiency. And when we translate this all into what an AI-powered newsroom might look like, we see the same 3 things recurring always. In fact, AI is already being used today for news gathering, algorithms that collect and process data from sensors, for news production also with smart tools to package stories much faster than ever before, and for news distribution with content distributed and personalized through AI. In fact, these newsrooms are already applying it. interviewed all of them for my research at Stanford. And whenever I talked to them, there was always one thing coming back. AI gives reporters more time to do what they do best, be creative and report in depth. And in the case of AP, Associated Press, it freed up almost 20% of their editors' time. So let's now dive into each step of that process of an AI-driven newsroom now. I'll give you some state-of-the-art examples and case studies, but also some pitfalls. When gathering news, we can use algorithms to collect data from sensors and take, for example, what they do at Reuters, at the platform they call News Tracer. What is News Tracer? Well, you can compare it to a couple of sensors that help reporters at Reuters detect and track the topics that are under the surface, and they can detect breaking news much faster with this tool, with this AI tool, as they did a couple of years ago with a big shooting in California that was flagged on social media and detected by their AI tool before any other news organization did. Text mining is something completely different, of course. You've probably heard of the Paradise Papers, the investigation that was coordinated by ICIJ, the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. Well, they used an AI-powered tool to automatically recognize and index text documents by recognizing entities such as people, places, dates in a huge amount of text. They could decipher 13.4 confidential documents related to these offshore investments, and they won a lot of awards with this kind of journalism. So in AI, so in news gathering, AI can really scale how journalists do analysis and how quickly they can derive meaning and insight from this analysis. Something different, and maybe it's sometimes confused, is natural language processing. It's an AI tool for extracting concepts and identifying relationships. It's one of the most relevant applications for journalists, I believe, and it's the area of AI that allows journalists to interpret large numbers of documents in text and speed up the process. And it's able to scan documents and find patterns, relationships, time, data, and so on. And it's different from text mining, because text mining, like we've seen before, deals with the text itself, such as the length of a text, the presence of certain words, while NLP deals with the underlying and latent metadata. So good, it's very good for sentiment analysis, what are the keywords and so on. And there are also other ways AI is used in the research phase for journalism, also in investigative journalism, with pattern recognition, for example. BuzzFeed is a good example. In, I believe, 2017, they published a story about spy planes after training a machine learning model to look for planes with flight patterns similar to those of the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI. But something very strange happened that shows that AI is not perfect and can sometimes give false positives, because during the investigation, the AI system also flagged plans of aircrafts doing skydiving and not spying, because they had similar flight patterns. And luckily, there were journalists who could detect or notice this error during the vetting process. So warning, it's up to the journalist to correct this. And this is an excellent example, I think, of having editorial oversight and insight over the algorithmic result, of course. So beware. I should say algorithms make mistakes. We need to ask them the same questions we would ask our human sources. And we also need to dare algorithms to ask some new questions. And I've written down some of those here. I think it's an important slide for the future because it relates to the ethics of AI. And that's something that will become more and more important over the coming years. So if you want, I can send you this slide as a sort of something to to hold on to for the coming years. But maybe let's move into the application of AI when it comes to news production. Once we've collected information using AI, how can the technology help us improve that information or format it in new ways? And let's take an example at Associated Press with news automation. I think it's the best practice in the industry. So this article here you see on the right is completely written by a robot journalist, a completely automated story. And this is how you're going to turn data directly into some kind of readable text. And it's using natural language generation to automate some of the financial and sports reporting. And if the journalist, for example, has access to a data set, they can use this subdomain of AI, NLG, which lets you turn that data into that story that reads exactly like a human written story. And this has a huge impact on AP, because in the business news, for example, AP went from covering 300 companies with human writers to covering almost 4,400, 4,500 companies with the help of these smart machines. So the goal is here not to automate the job of the journalist itself, but to free them up to do other things. For example, to investigate one of the companies they report on with this automated tool. So they can go deeper, they can, yeah, do real investigative journalism. And how does automation work? Well, quickly, once a journalist has the data, he can make sure it's in a proper structure. Then an automation editor, as they call them now, they use a template machine to publish thousands of stories with one push on a button. And these automated stories are then sent back to a human editor for final review to check on any errors, of course. And so you can see how human journalists will still have a crucial role to play. But once again, a warning, because AI can also create false texts. As we all know, new developments in natural language generation use deep learning techniques. That's another subdomain of AI. Makes it possible to create false text on a large scale. And I did a little experiment here on the right. It's completely fake. I wrote the first sentence by myself, and then it's fully engaged in AI with using GPT-2. That's the OpenAI Institute's AI tool. And yeah, I started writing these first two lines, and you see how it's still quite logical, this text. It's completely synthetic, and it's obviously very dangerous for the spread of disinformation, because now the successor of this tool, GPT-3, is even better, and it's not freely available, but it's improving very, very fast. So as the technology evolves, there are positive implications for use cases in our industry, but there are also, I think, negative implications, and journalists need to hold these algorithms accountable, of course, because we're on the first line of defense, you could say, when evaluating this type of information. Fortunately, I have to, okay. Yeah, fortunately, there are also AI tools that combat fake news. This is, for example, a tool developed by the University of Washington. And then we have Fandango, that's a European project. It's co-developed by VRT, But maybe we have another example now coming up called video labeling. We'll stay with this topic of news production and look at how Sky News, for example, used facial recognition with this tool called Who's Who. It's a tool they used in 2018 to spot and identify guests arriving at the royal wedding in the UK. But another warning: AI can make mistakes. As in any field of AI, there are always biases at play, and this is a fascinating analysis you see here of how computer vision algorithms can draw the wrong conclusions. For example, they make more errors recognizing women with darker skin tones compared to only 1% for men with lighter skin tones. So yes, the algorithm can be considered as sexist or even racist, but that has everything to do with how these algorithms were created, of course, and trained. And it produces these errors probably because, yeah, there was not enough diversity in the data used to train these algorithms, or the computer engineers were all white or Indian man with their own preferences. And in response, these technology companies are creating new data sets with photos of pictures that are more diverse, with different skin tones, different skin types, and so on. So if you're thinking about AI in editorial or in the newsroom, keep in mind that all of these algorithms can make mistakes. So it's crucial to involve the human editor in the process. With AI, like I mentioned before, it's easier and easier to create synthetic video. And this is a topic I could talk for hours about, and not in this short time span of 30 minutes, because this is what my research at Stanford was focused on. There are many examples already available, but BBC did a test with a newsreader who speaks only English, but with the help of AI software from the British company Synthesia. It turns out he can speak Spanish, he can speak Mandarin, he can speak Hindi, Portuguese, and so on. Normally I have this little clip that I show here.
इसलिए मैं बेताबी से देखना चाहता हूँ.
What did you think watching
That's
that?
incredible, actually.
But it
and
will
unsettling.
take us a bit too
So I
long.
know I
I
can't
should
do that.
invite you to have a look at
1989.
this. It's quite impressive. I mentioned how Asia is using synthetic news anchors already. The state news agency Xinhua of China is using this. Why in China? Why in Asia? Because, yeah, people don't mind that the news is being read by an artificial journalist. Here, I think it will take much longer, but imagine how we can create our own favorite anchor, for example. It will result, you could say, in a more personalized experience in a way. It could also lead to a better engagement with news. That's what experts believe. But again, I must warn of what could go wrong and is already going wrong if you see this.
现场的各位朋友，
So this is
大
how
家
she
好。
talks, and this is one of the dangers.
In de afgelopen decennia hebben we een dramatische toename gezien van ziekten
So
zoals...
this is how the Belgian prime minister was deep-faked, Sophie Wilmès. It's one of the first political deepfakes ever. It was created by climate activists of Extinction Rebellion. Of course, they told us later on that this was a deepfake, but just imagine how this could fall in the wrong hands, of course. And it's already possible on our smartphone to create a deepfake with all kinds of tools. So the implications for our job as a journalist are tremendously. So finally, I hope we're still a bit on schedule. Let's talk about the use of AI in news distribution. It's an important topic of this this webinar, of course. How is technology changing the final step in our process? Let's look at personalized news, and we've seen how synthetic news anchors are emerging, and this is how the Times has an AI-powered tool called James. It's sort of digital butler using data to learn about readers' habits, interests, and preferences. Another example is this one from the Finnish public broadcaster YLE. It's a little robot called Voito, and it helps readers to get a more personalized news feed. But again, a big warning, of course, too much personalization can lead to information bubbles. As we all know, they show you more of the same information and they confirm our view of the world, our bias, and so on. And this is increasingly becoming a problem for online polarization, as we all know. So to address this polarization online, we can use an AI comment moderation tool. For example, at the New York Times, they use a tool called Perspective API to identify harmful content. And it's based on a sort of toxicity score. If the score is very high, the comment editor flags the comment and will take action. And in Europe, Media House, it's a huge media concern, is involved with, for example, us with VRT in a similar project called Rethoric, which stands for Reducing Hate with Editorial Tools for Online Reactions and Comments. And this way, the algorithm is trained to take large amounts of comments from online platforms and so on, and they build models based on that initial data, and it looks very promising. But yeah, again, a warning about algorithm bias, algorithmic bias, of course. If there is no oversight, the AI can be biased. And in a research paper by some interesting academics, they found out that in some cases, Perspective AI API, the tool that the New York Times is using, sometimes can flag content that is toxic, but in fact is completely not toxic. So editors should always be aware to detect bias and always stay in the loop. Another interesting case study is how to prevent bias, in this case, gender bias. And the Financial Times developed the tool called She Said, He Said. It's a bot that automatically tracks whether a quoted source is male or female. And this system is very interesting because it's using text analytics algorithms to track pronouns and first names to determine the gender of people mentioned in a given article. And if you're interested, with my Stanford team, we developed something similar for video. It's called the TV News Analyzer tool, which uses facial recognition, and it was tested at our newsroom at VRT. And the results were very promising. But there was a little bottleneck problem, a technical issue. Finally, I like to end with some examples from the Wall Street Journal. It's using AI to increase paywall subscriptions. And it really works, apparently. The numbers have increased dramatically. And that's not just because of Trump or because of the pandemic that we all see, but I believe European news publishers are already using this, for example, at Media House. So yes, AI is clearly changing the news industry and our thinking about news. And I think it's really important to state that implementing these tools just for the experimentation sides is not the right approach. These technologies need to be implemented to address a challenge or a problem that your newsroom, for example, is facing. And that's a very important first step. The important step you next take is to collect and label the data, and then develop and train a model, verify this model, and then build this tool or integrate it in an existing system. And I think it's really important to start very small, to do a lot of testing first and then roll it out gradually. So based on design thinking methodology, I developed this roadmap for news editors who want to introduce AI with a following steps. Introduce AI with this small project, as I just mentioned. Keep the journalists informed, then decide where and how you are going to develop this tool, and maybe you have the capacity to do it in-house with your own journalist, or maybe you are working with academics. Okay, we have to close the session. I see here almost in 50 seconds. Time is going very fast, but I'm still finishing if I'm allowed to, Juklan.
Yes, you can quickly.
Yeah,
quickly.
Yeah, if I can still use my. So to conclude, even when technology changes, our journalistic standards should stay the same. AI is prone to bias as humans, and journalists can best leverage when they experiment with it, and never forget the ethical considerations inherent to our journalism. So if you want to learn more, there's a crash course from Google that I developed. There's this
there might be someone attending this webinar who might have a new